did you grow up?
My father was in the military when I was young. He was a naval doctor. I was actually born in Omaha, Nebraska. Not everyone knows that.
It's a big Navy town.
Up until the seventh grade, we moved around quite a bit on the West Coast. And then seventh grade, we settled in Portland, Oregon. So I did seventh, eighth grade and high school there. So really Oregon is my home. And then from there, went down to California, went to the University of California at Berkeley. It was funny, really funny story, actually. When I was a junior in college, I wanted to get an internship. And so I went, back in the days, it was just like the board where you go look at the internships that are available, like a physical piece of paper, stapled on the side of a wall. And it said sales and marketing internship. And I remember thinking, that'll be great because I can maybe go on a sales call, maybe write a brochure, maybe learn how to create press releases. I thought it would be this really great kind of broad experience. But when I got there, they handed me a box of brochures and said, your job this summer is to be a cold caller, and you're gonna pass out brochures door to door. Which I thought was great because I was a competitive runner growing up, and I thought, oh, this is great. I get to walk around all summer. That's perfect. And so my territory for cold calling was the Silicon Valley. And back then, it was fairly sparse, right? This was in 1988. And I was just walking around handing out brochures, and I walked into this office, and the person at the front desk said, this was at a copy machine. It was at Minolta Copiers. And the person said, I don't know what kind of copier you have, but ours just broke. And if you can get me one, I'll buy it. So I went back to the senior salespeople and said, hey, I think I may have just sold my first machine. And they said, well, then just go do that for the summer. And that's really how I got my start. And sales was just,
selling Minolta copiers.
That summer I made a small fortune from my point of view. So I rolled back into my senior year, just, flush with cash.
Daddy Warbucks.
Yeah. And so my first job out of school was selling copiers door to door, and was extraordinarily successful at it. And I still think it's really what made me who I am today. It's sort of the, I call it the green beret of business. There's nothing harder than selling copiers.
You think everyone should do it?
Everyone should have some kind of an experience like that. Yes. It can come in many different forms.
I always insisted that my kids work in the service business, that they work as waiters, waitresses, busboys. And I always thought, having done it myself, that you'll learn a lot about yourself and other people when you work for tips.
Absolutely. That's true.
And how to size up people, who the good tippers are going to be, who aren't, And as I always explain to my kids, much to their chagrin, I always say, and out of my grandkids, it doesn't cost extra to have a little personality. So after selling copiers, finishing your senior year, what came next?
I knew in school that I wanted to be an entrepreneur. It became clear to me in my senior year. I knew I wanted to start a company. I knew I wanted to be on my own and build a business, but I knew it in college. And so I kind of, when I got out of school, just started this journey to figure out how. And this was actually one of my best. I was basically in sales for about 10 years. So I sold first the copiers, then healthcare imaging equipment to hospitals, then hardware, then software. Every single sales call I went on, the first thing I would do is I would say, hi, my name's Emmet Keeffe. I want to start my own business. Do you have any ideas for me? And I'd start a conversation about, how do I get to be an entrepreneur? How do I get to start my own business? And that was always the first discussion. I wouldn't start talking about the product that I was selling or anything related to my job. I was just trying to find an answer to these questions. I want to write a book someday. It's called Building a Network with Purpose. I wanted to start a business, and that was how I formed every single relationship. And it makes a very deep and long-lasting relationship because they want to stay in touch and find out what happened, right? You almost become like a walking TV show. Right.
But they've invested in you, not literally from a capital point of view, but from a time and energy and thought point of view.
Absolutely. And what I've always found is if you ask the same question enough times, ultimately the answer will boil down. Like after hundreds of conversations, maybe even more than 1,000, I ultimately realized there were kind of three things I had to do. One was find a topic that I was passionate about. Mm-hmm. That was the guidance I was getting. And I didn't know what that was at the time. Second piece of advice was if you can, try and self-fund it, because the longer you can self-fund the business, the better.
Yeah.
And so that meant, as a sales executive, I was always trying to make more money, right? Whenever I would hit some target, I wanted to hit the next target. The third and possibly most important advice that I got was find a business partner that you can spend your life with, and think of it almost like a marriage. And so I was kind of searching for that business partner for 10 years, searching for the right topic, saving money to start the business. And so that, from sort of age 20 to 30, that was my purpose.
And what kinds of businesses did you think of then?
Every time I was in a business, I was thinking about what could I start in that specific domain. So my second business that I was in was it was a high-end ultrasound machine. And the platform was built on sort of previous generation technology. And there was a lot of whispering that it might be possible to build the same platform on a PC-based architecture, which would mean you could build it for substantially less money. And you could also potentially do kind of breakthrough things from an imaging standpoint. So when I was in healthcare, I was thinking about, could I start some sort of a PC-based ultrasound machine? And nearly got there. I mean, I had the name for the business, and I found the business partner. It didn't feel right. And I also felt like I wasn't ready. I've always been very thoughtful about being ready. And I felt like at that age, it wasn't quite the time for me to do that.
You looked at the things around you. So you were exposed to things you weren't exposed to before. So I work in a men's and boys clothing store. I'm in high school, and I work there part-time after school on weekends. And these guys come in, one guy dressed very well. He drove a beautiful car. And I grew up in a very dark blue collar community in Queens. And I see this fella, he's all dressed up. He looks like he lives well. He tells me where he lives. It's a nice community on Long Island. And he sells slacks. Now, who would have thought that selling slacks to all these retail stores would be a lucrative business? So you meet all the salesmen who sold the shirts and the sweaters and the suits and the slacks and the belts and the ties and all the accessories. And you found that there's all these other careers, and this guy's partially into manufacturing. And so you learn about things that you're not going to learn about in school. If you don't have those exposures, how do you learn about all the different nooks and crannies of the economy that might be attractive?
Well, you also learn what you don't like.
Yes.
Like my job, my internship that I took before the sales internship was basically kind of a finance internship, and it was at a environmental cleanup business. And I was sort of keeping track of all the details around when we went to the cleanup site, how many Tyvek suits did we use and what were all the materials we used. And there was like a ton of detail to track everything that we were doing at the site, because we were sort of an EPA contractor. And I realized through that experience, I'm not a detail guy. I don't like finance. I'm not, I don't want to sit and look at a spreadsheet. It didn't feel right. So it was a great learning experience. And then I realized that's not what I want to do.
So you learn what you're attracted to and what you're not attracted to.
That's right.
But do you think people sometimes ignore the fact that they're not attracted to things, but feel like they need to do them anyway because it's more money?
When I was coming out of college, I think many kids were sort of told by their parents what they should do. You need to be a doctor. You should be a lawyer. You should go to work at a consulting firm. The kids were sort of given guidance on what to go do. And I was actually very, very fortunate that my father didn't give me any of that guidance. He said, look, you've got to find what you're passionate about and build a career and a life around that passion. And I think this is what kids should be thinking about really deeply when they're in college, is trying to get to the bottom of what they're passionate about. Uh-huh. And then could they build a life and a career around that passion, versus just going down the path that society tells you have to go down.
What was your first big breakthrough in terms of genuine entrepreneurship? You started building your network when you're selling Minolta copy machines. Do you think then about maintaining any of those relationships? How does that underlying drive of building a supportive community begin to take shape? And how early on were you purposeful about that?
Literally when I got out of school, and I've stayed in touch. Anyone that I've ever worked with or any relationship that I've ever established, I'm in touch with all those people. I mean, my boss at the time in the healthcare business, I mean, he and I are still very close friends, and we shared so many great moments and had so many laughs. It's interesting. There's another kind of story to my life, and that is I've actually always pursued business purpose and personal purpose in parallel, which is fairly rare. As I was going through this journey, trying to get to the bottom of what made me happy, I realized that it was, in the end, cars. I was one of those kids that I had, Matchbox cars and Corgis and, building model cars. And when I was 14, I wanted to buy my first car. And when I was in college, I got exposed to the racing for the first time. A friend brought me to Napa to a sprint car race. And that night, it just clicked. I knew this is what I want to do. I knew it that night.
That's great.
From there, I started going to a bunch of different races. And in 1995, I went to my first Formula One race. It was in Canada. And Ferrari had not won a race for 20 years. And the driver at the time, his name was Jean Alesi, had never won a race, but he was an extraordinary driver. And everyone knew he should have been a multiple race winner. He should have been a champion. So when he won, it was the most emotional moment. And that's when I knew I wanted to do something in Formula One. So from an entrepreneurship standpoint and a sort of a personal purpose standpoint, that's when my personal purpose became really crystal clear. And then from there, I started to think about, okay, what's my business purpose? And I ended up setting a really, really crazy goal. I wanted to start a company and take it to $1 billion in revenue. And that was my business purpose. Mm-hmm. The reason why I landed on that is I knew if I achieved that, I'd be in a position to go try and compete in Formula One. And it's funny, this week I heard something. We do all these virtual roundtables now where we bring people together to have.
You used to do those in person, didn't you?
We used to do them in person. And that's actually where we had our first fun time together in 2007 at one of those. Somebody said something today or this week. He said, if people don't laugh out loud when you tell them your goal, it's not big enough. And I thought, that is exactly right. And when I first started talking about this $1 billion business and the fact that I wanted to compete in Formula One, people would just look at me funny and just either look at me strange or just laugh because it was that out there.
But was your goal, the second half of your goal, to compete in Formula One?
Originally, it was to quote unquote start a Formula One team, which I ultimately achieved, and we failed in the end. We didn't go racing, and then I changed the goal to win the championship because I thought, okay, and I actually thought hard just about ticking the box. Mm-hmm. But ultimately said, no, I'm going to reset the goal and make it bigger. 2007,
you talked about going to Canada in 1995, when Ferrari won her first race in 20 years, and Alesi won his first race. A fellow who was highly talented and should have been, by everyone's measure, successful for a long time. When I was your guest with one of your business group gatherings in Long Beach, when I first got to know and watch you, you invited Mary Lou and I, my wife Mary Lou and I, to that race, and it was the first race I'd been to. Where there's races where I grew up in Queens, but that was horses because I grew up near Aqueduct racetrack, and then there was one stretch of the road on the way to the beach where everyone would go and drag race. But that was as close as I ever came to it. And going to that was really interesting. And you had a dinner on Saturday night, and Mary Lou and I wound up sitting at a table with a young man named Will Power. And I couldn't believe that really was his name, but he's a young Australian fellow. And during the course of the conversation, you drew out of him that he'd been in racing for several years and hadn't won yet. And he told us that night at dinner that if he didn't win tomorrow on Sunday, that he'd have to quit racing. And he had that agreement with his parents. He was in fifth place, and you explained to me that it was very, very hard to win in this particular street race in the streets of Long Beach, which are narrow and windy. Yep. And it was very hard to pass. So position going into that Sunday was critically important. He's in fifth place, very unlikely to win. But we're in the pits the next morning, and the number one car, I think it was McDonald's car, they start your engines, press the button, doesn't start. Another car in the four ahead of him doesn't start. And he's able to pass two others and win his first race.
Absolutely.
But to get exposed like that through your eyes, with your passion, with your knowledge, walking us around, and you were the Pied Piper and your group of guests followed you around, it was quite an experience. And it's where I really got to know you and build the friendship we have all these years. I was always struck by what we'll come back to now, which is that you were so open and confident and bold, to tell people what your goals were?
Many people think that asking for help is a sign of weakness.
Yes.
I actually believe it's a sign of power. If you're comfortable asking for help, it's a strength, right? I mean, I know people are uncomfortable asking for help because my phone doesn't ring very often with people asking me for help. Yeah, I mean, rarely ever. And whenever somebody does call me asking for help, I pounce on it. I put everything down and I just pounce on it because I know how important that is. But I think broadly, people think it's a sign of weakness. It's actually a sign of strength. I probably ask for help 20, 30, 40 times a day. And people just know that about me. And the thing I've found about asking for help is people enjoy helping. And particularly if you have a dream and a purpose and you're on some kind of a mission, they want to help. So that's been one major insight over the years.
So ask for help and broadcast your goals.
Exactly. Everywhere you go. I mean, I literally, if I'm at a school function or in a business meeting or at a family function, even random people, I'll tell my goals and dreams. And the other big thing that started to happen as the years went on is the dots start connecting in really unexpected ways. For example, I had broadcasted so widely my dream about Formula One that in 2008, my phone rang. And it was funny because I was running super fast as I always do. I was incredibly busy. I hadn't even had a moment to see, I got on the phone and this gentleman says, "Hi, Emmet, Peter here." He says, I do a little bit of TV work. I'm sure you know that, but I want to talk to you about something else. And I'm actually texting my assistant at the time asking, who is this guy, Peter? And it turns out he's this massively famous Formula One, personality and someone that I've been watching on TV forever. Yeah. And he had heard about my dream just through a random person in the sport and called me to say, "I have an idea I want to pursue with you in Formula One." Later, and this is after I moved to London, I was at a restaurant, sort of private club type place in London. And we had dinner, and then I went upstairs and just met this woman. We started chatting. She was a former Olympic swimmer, and I was telling her about my Formula One dream. And she said, "Well, I don't know if this matters, but I'm the personal assistant for the founder of Formula E. Would you like to meet the founder of Formula E?" And I said, "Yeah, that matters. I'd love to." Through a series of events, through that introduction, I ended up becoming a team owner in Formula 2, Formula 3, Formula 4. And we ended up running a Formula E team and we won the championship. So in 2014, we won.
No, now you got to raise the bar again.
We won the championship, actually.
Okay, so that was an accumulation of a season of racing?
Exactly. The team was called at the time Team China, and we didn't own the team, but we were running the team. And that's kind of the other magic of sharing your goals and dreams with everyone that you meet, is the dots will begin to connect in really unexpected ways. And it's interesting, like, I don't know if you've watched the Steve Jobs commencement speech at Stanford recently. I watched it
several times.
Yeah. He was talking about that. He was saying that the dots only connect backwards, right? They don't connect forwards. So anyway, that's another kind of big lesson I've learned over, during that period.
You broadcast your dreams to most of the people you meet. How has social media changed your outlook in terms of building your network, building your relationships? Some people think you build a network to enrich yourself. You build a network through service.
Yeah, I've actually never gotten into social.
Well, that is so ironic.
No.
Considering that you're a partner at Insight Venture Partners, which is one of the hottest tech investment firms in the world and has been for a long time. How could that be, Emmett?
I mean, of course, if you look at my LinkedIn page, I mean, I'm posting stuff all the time. I mean, I run a program called Ignite. We're posting thought leadership all the time. So been active there, but I don't really think of it as a way to develop meaningful relationships and lifelong relationships.
But what about keeping in touch?
Every day, I have as many as 14 30-minute calls back to back. So often from 1 o'clock to 7 o'clock, I have 14 calls a day, and that's the way I stay in touch with people is in-person interactions. And I've actually found this virtual world, the Zoom world, to be dramatically more productive.
How different has your life been this year? You started to touch on it.
one thing I always said as kind of a joke, it made people laugh, is I would tell people that I'm quote unquote interested in balance. I've been saying that for several years leading up to the crisis.
You've been lying.
I mean, I was actually interested in it. I didn't have it.
Just not pursuing it.
But I've actually found balance. I mean, the way my day works now is I do a Zoom workout first thing in the morning. We do yoga, we do stretching, we do weights, we do cardio. So every single morning for an hour.
Do you just watch a video, or it's a Zoom class?
I have a Zoom, a person that runs me through it. And every day it's a little bit different. So Start out with an incredible physical workout. So I'm investing more in physical well-being than I have in years. Mm-hmm. And then in the morning, I do all my internal calls, I do emails, I do kind of projects, catch-up work. And then midday, I do a 1 hour silent walk religiously. No phone calls, no music, no podcast, just 1 hour dead silence, just time to think. I don't plan what I'm going to think about. I just let my mind go where it wants to go.
Do you take a notepad?
No, but I do have my phone. So and it's where I have all my best ideas. I mean, I've had so many breakthrough, innovative ideas, and I'll write them down on the phone.
Is it meditative?
It is my meditation. Yeah. Yes. I couldn't meditate because my mind moves too fast. I could barely count to 10. I could count to like 3 or 4 before my mind would shoot off in some other direction. But but the walking, it works. And so I do that every day for an hour. And then I come back and I do my 14 calls back to back. And I have more balance now, and I'm more productive now than I ever have been.
So this changes your life forever.
I'm going to try very hard to make sure that it does. I'm going to work very hard. The thing that no one's talking about right now is the virtual workplace is way more sustainable. I mean, if everybody's not jumping back on trains and taxis and driving to work and flying, we're going to be pumping less carbon up into the atmosphere. Yep. So I really hope that we stay in a hybrid workplace.
I think hybrid is the word of the day for the next decade.
Absolutely.
I mean, the idea of us all commuting to an office 5 days a week, working 10, 11, 12-hour days, incredibly inefficient.
When I was in London, I thought about, if I used to have a meeting at Canary Wharf, what does that look like, right? And what that looked like is get in a black cab, take a ride to the tube station, get in the tube, very compact, painful ride on the tube. You're not getting any work done there. Then get out of the tube, walk to the office you're going to, put your computer bag through security, then stand in the security line, then stand in the elevator line, then get upstairs, then have to go through security again. Then you're finally sitting in a conference room, which is 2 hours later, and you didn't get anything done during those 2 hours. Then you have like a 30-minute interaction, which is fairly impersonal, really. I mean, the person doesn't walk in and tell you about their house and their kids and their dogs, and you're straight to business. So you're not really forming any kind of a personal connection. So you have a 30-minute meeting, and then you turn around and have to go 2 hours backwards. So should I do that for 4.5 hours, or should I have 5 meaningful Zoom dialogues where I can really get to know those people a bit and also move something forward? And that's why I think it's so much more productive.
I have a collection of COVID buddies, people who I feel I'm friends with, that I've met over the last 15 months and gotten to know and developed a relationship with, and I've never met them in person.
Exactly.
And I didn't think that was really possible.
I couldn't agree more.
One of those women I just had lunch with this week, and I was kidding with her, and I said, we were talking about COVID buddies, and she gives me the bump across the table. She goes, "I'm one of your COVID buddies." I said, "That's right, you are." But I've gotten to know her so well that the first time we met in person, it didn't seem like it was the first time we'd met in person.
My father, after he was in the military, he went on to be an extraordinary, very famous physician. He was a pioneer of liver transplant. He was a pioneer of in the world of hepatitis and hepatology. He was a world leader in gastroenterology. I mean, he was just an extraordinary human being and father, mentor, friend. He passed away unexpectedly, which just completely, turned my world upside down. And it caused me to basically reevaluate everything. And it caused me to ultimately realize that it was time for me to drop those purposes that I had. And I actually made the decision as I was driving to the hospital, made the decision at that moment that I was going to make big changes in my life. And then I started that journey all over again, just like when I was 20. I started it all over again to try and figure out what is my new business purpose going to be, and what's my new personal purpose going to be. Mm-hmm. And so it took me, on the business side, it took me about 3 years to get to the bottom of that. And on the personal side, it took me actually 7 years to get to the bottom of that. So it's interesting. I've gone through the process again, and I'm now sort of on a new path. I never won the Formula One championship. We ended up in a different series, but close enough. And on the business side, we didn't get to $1 billion in revenue, but we built a very substantial business. And that's one of the other, I think, principles of goal setting is it's okay if you don't get to the ultimate, the goal that makes people laugh out loud.
Yep.
It's okay, because you will still actually get somewhere really extraordinary if you climb that mountain.
I had another friend, a very successful guy, no longer with us, and he said, when you first hear a business idea, if you don't laugh, it's not a good enough idea.
That's so true.
And now you're in that world. So take me up the personal ladder just a bit, and somewhere along the line, somebody buys into your goals and says yes. Tell us about your bride.
Oh, that's an interesting story in itself. We actually met when I was 16 and she was 15. And we met at a party at a cemetery in Portland, Oregon.
Of course.
She was the first and last person I ever dated. I mean, she's my only girlfriend, and we've been together ever since then. And she's really extraordinary. Her name is Deborah, and we've built an amazing life together. But yeah, I guess in today's world, it's fairly rare, but we've been together since we were very young.
And a couple of critters come along. Somehow, you were home sometimes.
We've got an Emmet IV, and he's finding his way. He's currently studying in Boston, and I think he'll be an entrepreneur, but we'll see. I mean, like my father, my advice to him is, find what you're passionate about and go do it. So he's working through that. And then our younger one is studying in California, and they're both amazing, very different.
What's your younger son's name?
His name's Mason.
Are they remote or are they back in class yet?
They studied in the English countryside for a year, which was an incredible time as a family.
I bet.
And now they're studying distance learning with friends. So Emmett's in Boston and Mason's in Idaho.
Another hybrid. You've been broadcasting your goals. You've been building a network with purpose. You've been hot in pursuit of your goals. Then you have this jolt in your life that shakes your foundation, your questions when you lose your dad unexpectedly in 2011. But then you decide to go on and assess the assets that you've accumulated as a person, as a business person, and you decide, hey, what I do and what I've done is applicable beyond my own goals and aspirations within my own business and my own Formula One pursuit. I could apply this elsewhere and amplify other people's efforts with the assets and the skills that I've developed. Tell us about how that happened.
Yeah, I mean, when I was trying to formulate what's my new business purpose going to be, fundamentally, I was thinking about, okay, I've got 10,000 relationships, and I'm very fanatical about sort of recording every relationship, and I've got all kinds of details around the relationships. So I've got this extraordinary asset of all these relationships, and I have 17 years of operating experience building a software business. So I ultimately came up with an idea to create a program that would sit inside of a private equity firm that would help accelerate the growth of a large number of software businesses, using those relationships and that experience. Ultimately, I realized that there was also an opportunity to deliver value to large corporations. So the other thing that we do is we we help large global companies accelerate their digital strategies, right? Because many of these large companies, they have to cross what I call the digital chasm. Some people call it the digital Rubicon. But in the next 5, 10, 20 years, they're going to have to fundamentally transform what they do. And this is really now, I'd say my business purpose is really that. It's really to take all the knowledge that I have, all the relationships, the portfolio that we have, all the assets, and help these large global companies cross that digital Rubicon. So that's my new business purpose.
So you take that skills and you brashly walk into a private equity firm and say, "I'm not a deal guy, but looking at the portfolio of things you can do, I can make your companies in the portfolio bigger and help them to go faster."
Exactly.
And how many times did you have that conversation with how many firms?
So I originally, once I formulated the idea, I started calling all the venture capital and private equity firms out there, and there was universal interest. I realized that the best place for me to build that would be at a later stage firm, because large corporations are more comfortable adopting later stage technology.
Yep.
And it was funny how it happened in the end with where I am now. Is my phone rang from one of the analysts at the firm wondering if my business wanted capital, because I was still CEO at the time of my business.
Yes.
And I said, no, but I have this idea that I'm formulating. And I pitched her on the idea. And she said, oh, I think our founder would be really interested in hearing that. So she arranged for me to meet the founder. And the second he heard it, he said, this is something we should definitely do together. And that's the first day that I started at the firm.
What year was that?
That was back in 2014.
And in the 7 years since then, you become a partner in that firm and you have a separate practice within the firm. Tell us about that.
So it's called Insight Ignite. And we have two different parts of the program. One is the one that focuses on the Global 2000. And there we purely want to understand their digital strategy. And we want to understand all the problems they're trying to solve, whether it's getting to the cloud faster, whether it's democratizing data, whether it's next generation endpoint protection and security, whether it's digital experience, whether it's IoT, whatever it might be. We want to know what's the strategy and what are the problems you're trying to solve. And then we curate solutions to those either from our portfolio or from things that we're contemplating. So that's the first part of the program. The second part is portfolio facing. And there we want to understand what's their pipeline look like, what sort of targets are they going after? And then we work to help them get doors open.
Amazing brashness and insight on your part, and amazing receptivity on the part of Insight to say, yeah, this is not formulaic in terms of what we do and what we know, but yes, we are a later stage firm and we can help our clients, the Fortune 2000, and our portfolio companies if we had this capability.
Exactly.
That's not to be expected that happens easily. But look at the success it's yielded. Tell me a little bit about where you see the world going now. Insight has been incredibly successful, and you introduced me to the firm, and I've been a happy investor since 2014 when you began at the firm. It's remarkable what they've accomplished and are accomplishing. But the pace is quickening, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, there's a business that we invested in recently that I think is really fascinating. It's called Wiz, and the website is wiz.io. And what's super interesting about them is they started the business in March of 2020. So right when the pandemic hit, they started the business and they closed their seed round of financing. 6 months later, they had a product done and out to market and started getting their first, Global 2000 customers. Then we led their Series A in January of this year, which was a $100 million round of financing. And then a few short months later,
$100 million of financing already.
Yep. And then a few months later, they closed their Series B for $130 million. And they've just shot up into the atmosphere. And what's interesting about that story actually is the pace of disruption is now operating at an even faster pace, right? Before the pandemic, there was a lot of talk about whether it's fintech, insurtech, health tech. There's always been at the Global 2000 sort of fear of disruption. But I think what's going to be happening now is the threat is even bigger now.
Because of the changes as a result of the pandemic?
I don't really think it's pandemic related. It's just that the technology is moving so fast. I mean, with
Unrelated
the cloud,
to the pandemic, just the pace of technology innovation.
yeah, there's a harmonic convergence. I mean, the cloud really continues to mature very, very quickly.
Yes.
AI is maturing quickly. Next generation data and analytics is maturing. Agentless, technology is maturing. There's a harmonic convergence happening of all these different technologies, which makes it possible for startups to get out of the gate even quicker and disrupt, at an even faster pace. So I think, the good news is, I mean, I wrote a thought leadership piece in 2018. It was controversial. It was called The Theater of Digital. And my perspective then, and even all the way through the end of 2019, was that there really wasn't anything materially happening in the world around digital. There was a lot of rhetoric and a lot of incubators, accelerators, foosball tables. I mean, there was a lot happening, but no real material change. COVID changed all that. I mean, there's been like a massive acceleration of digital change over the last year. And one of the questions I was asking at the end of last year is, can we sustain this pace of change? And I think we got our answer for 2021. And the answer is yes, because the pandemic is still here. And so thankfully, I'd say digital change has been unlocked. And I think, to answer your question, I think over the next 20 years, there's going to be an extraordinary amount of digital change happening. I think
and you're here to help your portfolio and your 2,000 business clients develop a roadmap, get an understanding, and have a deliberate and thoughtful plan about how to keep pace with that change.
Yeah, I mean, we're all about bringing the needs of the Global 2000 and the most innovative technology in the world, bring that together and accelerate digital change and help these large companies.
This is what happens every time I talk to you, Emmett. My anxiety level is up, my pulse is quickened, and I'm running out of ink from taking notes.
Well, I'd love to say a few words about my nonprofit work if we have time.
That's what I wanted to ask you about, because with that being a consequence of every interaction I have with you, there's a need for an ability to get a hold of those emotions that I'm feeling, that you've stirred. And you do a lot of work in this area. And I've met Dr. Dan through you. And tell us about your work with the Contentment Foundation.
Yeah, so this was the journey I went on starting in 2011. And how it started is I wanted to find something I could do philanthropically, in my father's honor, basically. That's how it started. And he was interested in sustainability and international peace. So I set down a path to see, could I do something game-changing there on one of those topics? The other thing that I was left with when he passed was an interest in happiness and trying to understand, what is it and do I have it?
What was the answer to that question?
Well, I found it in Bhutan, actually, which is where I met Dr. Daniel Cordaro. So I ended up, of course, as always, I was telling everyone I met that I wanted to find, my new personal purpose. It's somehow it's going to be happiness related. It's somehow sustainability and international peace related. And a friend of mine said, well, I have a friend who's going to organize a trip to Bhutan. Why don't you go with him? Because they're going to go try and understand how the kingdom of Bhutan, thinks about happiness. So that's how I ended up there.
Excuse me, does the A train in Manhattan go to Bhutan?
I don't think so. You have to, there's various places you fly in, but Kathmandu is one of those. I don't know if there's a stop in Kathmandu.
I think it's right after 207th Street.
Daniel had spent the previous 5 years working on a curriculum for mental well-being for children. Mm-hmm. So he pulled together all of the world's leading academic experts and asked the question, if we were going to create a definitive curriculum to help children be sustainably well, what would that look like? And when I met him, they had just finished it. And he and I connected and decided, let's do this together. And, I joined him as a co-founder, really to lead the distribution, because they didn't have the business experience.
They didn't want you to write the curriculum?
No, I'm on my own well-being journey. What's fascinating about mental well-being, 25% of it is about the mind, about learning how to clear the mind, and that's mindfulness. But 75% is about learning how to create peace from within, inner peace, right? That's there's 4 major pillars of sustainable well-being. One of them is mindfulness, but the other 3 are related to inner peace. And it turns out that when you have inner peace, you're not likely going to be a bully. You're probably not going to get in a fight. You're probably not going to end up going to war. And so it turns out that this whole topic of sustainable mental well-being is actually international peace related. And the other thing that I've found is that when you learn how to clear your mind and you learn how to have a clear inner self, you learn how to pay attention, and you become more sensitive about sustainability. You start realizing we need to make sure we don't destroy this planet, right? So in a really strange way, I found something that I could do that was sustainability related and peace related through meeting Dr. Daniel Cordaro in Bhutan. Never could have expected it. And as usual, it was hundreds or thousands of conversations that led me to Bhutan. Mm-hmm. And that's now my personal purpose. I mean, he and I have set out, we're going to try and get the curriculum to 1 billion children. And that's what we've set out to do together. And
geez, it sounds vaguely familiar here. Goal setting, being bold,
that's right.
Having big outsized goals.
That's right. That's right.
And caring about other people.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, congratulations to you on all the things that you do, Emmet. You're younger than me, but I learn from you all the time. I enjoy your positivity and your self-confidence. I always try and take something from the interactions I have in terms of learning or curiosity or adventure or discovery, and you bring all of the above to the table. And I'm very lucky to have you.
Really enjoyed our relationship. Yeah, I've really enjoyed our relationship as well.
Well, hopefully, I know we'll get to talk again soon, because we're going to chat with Dr. Dan Cordaro soon. You're trying to get me involved there with the foundation, your work you're doing, and I'm very sure you'll succeed.
I know we will.
Thanks, Emmet. Have a great rest of the day and a weekend.
Okay, you too.
Thanks.